Okay, we have studied in trigonometry the equivalent angles. If I have an angle like this angle of size 30, we can add 360 to this angle to get equivalent angle. It will be 390. So the angle of size 30 is the same as the angle of size 390. And also we have studied the angle in its standard position. The angle in its standard position is that angle of initial side on the positive direction of x-axis, and the terminal side lies in any quadrant, okay, like this angle. So this angle of side 30, if we rotate this angle, okay, 360, you will get an angle of size 390, and this angle is equivalent to the angle of size 30. And also we can subtract from the angle of size 30, we can subtract 360. Okay, you will get an angle of size negative 330. This angle is equivalent to the angle of size 30. So adding 360 once or more than one time leads to get an equivalent angle, and subtracting 360 once or more than one time leads to get an equivalent angle. Also, we have studied the unit circle, if you remember. Yusuf, what do you know about the unit circle? Yusuf? Yusuf, do you hear me?
Yes.
What do you know about unit circle? In the unit circle, we have x to the power of 2 plus y to the power of 2 equals what? 1. And what is x? X is cosine. So cosine to the power of 2 theta plus sine to the power of 2 theta, if you remember, equals what? 1. Okay?
Okay.
In the unit circle, what is the unit circle? Is that circle of radius length 1 unit. Let's focus now on the coordinates of the unit circle here. This point and this point and this point. This point, the two coordinates of this point is 1 and 0. And the two coordinates of this point is 0 and 1. And this point is negative 1 and 0. And this point is 0 and negative 1. And this angle is 0. This angle, 0 angle. And this angle is 90. And this angle 180. 270. And this quadrant is the first quadrant, second quadrant, third quadrant, and fourth quadrant. So if I asked you about cosine 0, what is the cosine 0? Cosine 0 is 1. Okay. And sine 0, sine 0.
Mr. 360.
This angle 0 is the like 360. Okay. And the angle of size 90, okay, we can find cosine 90 and sine 90. Cosine 90 is 0 and sine 90 is 1, and 180 and 270. Also, we have studied the inverse trigonometric functions. Do you know, Mariam, what is the inverse of sine? Cosec. Cosec is 1 over sine, the inverse of sine. And what is the inverse of cosine? Is sec. So sec is 1 over cosine. And what is the inverse of tan? Is cotan. So what is cotan? Cotan is 1 over tan. Okay. Also, we have studied the two types of measuring angle, the angle. We have radian measure and we have degree measure. And if you remember this rule, x over 180 equals theta radian over pi. Okay. What is the theta radian? Theta radian, Mariam, equals what? Mariam, do you hear me?
Yes, theta radian equal x measure times.
What is the simple definition of theta radian? What is the theta radian? Is the ratio between what? L and the radius. So theta radian equals what? L over R. Theta radian is that measure of the angle, okay, which is equal to L, the length of the arc divided by the radius length. This is L and this is R. Do you know it?
Yes.
And also we have studied how can we find the angle, the size of any angle. So if I ask you about cosine 350, we can write 350 as what? We can express 350. First of all, 350 lies in which quadrant?
Fourth.
It's in the fourth quadrant, okay? So in the fourth quadrant, what is the sign of this angle? Cosine in the fourth angle, in the fourth quadrant, is it positive or negative? Do you remember this sentence, add sugar to coffee? Do you remember it?
Yes.
Okay. What does it mean, Yusuf? Add means all trigonometric functions are positive. S means what?
Sign negative.
Sine is positive.
Sign positive.
Okay. And in the third quadrant,
Tan positive.
tan is positive. Do you remember it, Yusuf?
Yes.
And in the fourth quadrant, cosine is
Cosine positive.
positive. So here, all trigonometric functions are positive. In the second quadrant, sine only is the positive function. And in the third quadrant, tan, and in the fourth quadrant, cosine. Okay, so 350 lies in the fourth quadrant. The sign of the cosine is positive. Okay. Let's draw the unit circle. This is the unit circle here, as you see. And I'm going to take a point on this circle, like this point. Any point on the circle. This point is defined as X and Y. The two coordinates of this point are X and Y. X represents cosine. X represents cosine and Y represents sine. Okay. If you completed drawing this triangle here, pay attention, everyone. This side is X and this side is Y. And the length of this side is 1. And this angle is theta. So if I asked you about sine theta equals opposite, okay, which is Y, over adjacent over hypotenuse, which is 1. So sine theta equals Y over 1. What about cosine theta? Cosine theta is adjacent, which is X, okay, divided by 1. X divided by 1 is X. So this point here, X and Y, represents cosine and sine. If we rotate this point here, if we moved here in this direction to this point, okay, we will notice that this point here in this place is the same as this point here in this place, okay? So what is the distance from this point here to the origin point? Is 1 unit, because it's a unit circle. So the distance here is 1. And this point is X and Y. But this point lies in the second quadrant. So X in the second quadrant is negative, so it will be negative X, and Y is positive, negative X and Y. Because I have drawn, okay, the two triangles to be congruent. The two triangles here are congruent. This angle theta, okay? What is the relation between the two triangles here? The two triangles here are congruent. Do you know why? Because here the length from this point, this angle is right. The length from this point to the origin is X. And the length from the origin point here to this point is negative X. And here we have Y, and here this side is Y. Okay. So sine and cosine are the same, but the difference between them and the sine here. When it comes to congruence of the two triangles, the two triangles here are congruent. This triangle here is congruent to this triangle here. They are the same. Okay. So cosine theta here is the same as cosine theta here, but the difference between them in the sign. And sine theta here is the same as sine theta here. If we ignored the negative, if we ignored the positive and the negative, you will find that sine and cosine and tan are the same for both of them. Okay. What is the measure of this angle according to standard position? You will go in this direction here, from this side here to this side here. So this angle is 180 minus theta. And 180 minus theta leads you to get two related angles. They are the same. 180 minus theta. Once again, if we moved from this side to this side here, the size of this angle, it's not theta. In the standard position, the angle here is 180 minus theta. Do you know it? This angle here is 180. And if we removed this area here, if we removed this side here, okay, you will get 180 minus theta. If we removed this angle here from the 180, if we took this angle, so it's 180 minus theta. So sine 180 minus theta is the same as sine theta. What does it mean? If this angle, let's say 30, so this angle is 30. So sine 30, all of us know sine 30 is half. What about this angle? It's the same, it's half. But we say sine 150, not 30. Why 150? Because this angle in the standard position it's not 30, it's 150. We can express 150 as what? As 180 minus 30. So what I want to say is sine 180 minus theta is the same as sine theta. Sine 180 minus theta is the same as theta. So the angle theta and the angle 180 minus theta, they are two related angles, or they are two angles which are the same. Okay, so sine 180 minus theta equals sine theta. Okay, what about cosine 180 minus theta? Cosine 180 minus theta is the same as cosine theta, but the difference between them in the sign, because 180 minus theta lies in which quadrant? In the second quadrant. And the cosine in the second quadrant, it's not positive, it's negative. So it will be negative cosine theta. And also tan 180 minus theta equals what? 180 minus theta lies in the second quadrant. And the sign of the tan in the second quadrant is negative. So it will be negative tan theta. Okay. Now let's talk about the angle of size 180 plus theta. Let's draw this angle. But first of all, we are going to draw the unit circle. Just recognize it well. And we are going to make a comparison between the angle of size theta. This is the angle of size theta here. And the angle of size 180 minus theta. So 180 180 plus theta. This angle here is 180. We are going to add theta to this angle. So this angle here, the first angle is theta, and the second angle, it's 180 plus theta. 180 plus theta, as you see here. Okay, this point is x and y, and this point is negative x and negative y. So sine 180 plus theta. 180 plus theta lies in the third quadrant. Lies in the third quadrant, as you see. And sine in the third quadrant is negative. So sine 180 plus theta is negative what? Is negative x, because here we have x and here we have negative x. So sine 180 plus theta equals negative sine theta. Okay. What about the cosine 180 plus theta? Cosine 180 plus theta, 180 plus theta, I said that 180 plus theta lies in the third quadrant. And the sign of cosine in the third quadrant, as you see here, here we have, sorry, it's y. Here cosine is x, sorry, it's x. And here we have negative x. What about y? Here we have y, and here we have negative y. So sine and cosine is the same. They are the same. Cosine 180 plus theta, it will be negative cosine theta. Okay. What about the tan? Tan 180 plus theta. Tan is sine over cosine. So tan theta is y over x. And tan 180 plus theta is negative y divided by negative x. Okay, negative divided by negative is positive, so it's going to be what? Y over x. So tan 180 plus theta is the same as tan theta. It's a positive. That's what I want to say. If I asked you about sine 210, how can we find sine 210? First of all, determine the quadrant. Determine the quadrant. What 210? Which quadrant? lies in which quadrant? In the third
Third.
quadrant.
Third.
Third quadrant. What is the sign of sine in the third quadrant? If you remember, add sugar to coffee. So add all of them are positive. Here in the second quadrant, sine is positive, 2 tan is positive, and here cosine. In the first quadrant, all trigonometric functions are positive. In the second quadrant, sine is only the positive function. Sine and its inverse, they are the positive functions. And in the third quadrant, tan only is the positive. And in the fourth quadrant, is cosine. Okay. Do you understand?
Yes.
Yes.
So the first step determine the quadrant. In which quadrant 210 lies in? In which quadrant? In the third quadrant. And the sign is positive or negative? Is negative. So determine the sign. Sign is negative. And 210 is going to be written as what? As 180 plus 30. So as you see here, I wrote it as 180. I wrote it as 180. Okay. Plus 30. So we are going to take this angle now, 30. And don't forget the sign of this function. It's negative. Because 210 lies in the third quadrant and sine in the third quadrant is negative. So it's going to be negative sine 30. Negative sine 30, which is negative half. Okay. What about, let's say, cosine 240? 240, Fatma, 240 lies in which quadrant?
Third.
Third quadrant, great. What is the sign of the cosine?
Negative.
Negative, so it's negative. How can we express 240 as 180 plus an angle? Mariam.
It will be plus 60.
Plus 60, great. So we have the sign negative, it will be negative cosine 60. Okay. So negative cosine 60 equals a negative. Cosine 60 equals what? If you remember, cosine 60 equals what? Equals a half. Okay. What about 10 120? So 120 lies in which quadrant? In which quadrant 120 lies in?
Second.
Second quadrant. What is the sign of 10 in the second quadrant? What is the sign of 10 in the second quadrant? Add sugar to coffee. So 10 is negative. In the second quadrant, 10 is negative. So I determined the quadrant and I determined the sign. Again, I determined the quadrant and secondly, I determined the sign. It's a negative. So 120, how can we express 120? We can express 120 as 180 plus or minus. So here in this
Minus
case,
60.
it's minus. Minus what? 60. It will be negative because the sign is negative. Negative. Don't forget to express it as 180 plus or minus. Okay. So it will be negative tan 60. and negative 1060. What is the 1060, Yusuf?
√3.
Root 3. Negative root 3. Everyone, did you get it?
Yes.
Yes.
So we express any angle as 180 plus theta or 180 minus theta. When expressing any angle as 180 plus theta or 180 minus theta, we would get related angles, okay? What about 360? We can express any angle also as 360 plus theta or 360 minus theta. We will get two related angles or two similar angles, okay? What about the angle of size 90? Let's draw the unit circle again. Here is the unit circle. And here is the XY coordinate plane. Pay attention, everyone. If I'm going to construct an angle here of size theta, this angle is theta. What about the angle of size 90 plus theta? So 90 plus theta, because this angle is theta here, this angle is theta. So we are going to add 90 to this angle. So this angle is going to be what? It's going to be 90 plus theta. This angle here is 90 plus theta. As you notice here, this is the X and this is the Y. And they are the two coordinates of this point. If we move the 90 plus theta, 90 plus theta, what do you notice? X and Y here in this case are different. Okay. So if I assume that this point is 3/5 and this point 4/5, you will see this point as negative 4/5 and 3/5. What happened? I replaced the X with Y and I replaced Y with X. I replaced X with Y and Y with X. So sine 90 plus theta will be cosine theta. Why is that? Because X is replaced with Y here, 3/5, for instance, and here negative 4/5. And Y here is 4/5 is replaced with 3/5. Okay,